I've never seen Paul George look this bad. He's averaging 10 points over the last 5 games. 2 of the last 5 games, he scored in single digits. Scored 9 one game, scored 2 last night.
The Clippers right now have no answers for the Nuggets. George, way off, hits the side of the backboard.
A 37-foot dagger.
I mean, that's a bad shot. I don't care what anybody says, that's a bad shot.
Has Paul George underachieved since leaving the Pacers?
I believe he has.
Paul George's career has fallen apart. As a member of the Sixers, he just finished his worst season as a pro, seeing a sharp decline in almost every major stat. He's now one of the most mocked and ridiculed players in the league, with nicknames like Podcast P and Pandemic P taunting him all over social media. But it wasn't supposed to be like this. Once, PG was revered throughout the league. Admirers praised him for his playoff success, tough mentality, and leadership. But each of these traits have slowly eroded over the years. Now, he's a shell of his former self, in a sudden collapse that has left even his biggest haters stunned. Where did it all go wrong for Paul George? How did he go from so loved at the beginning to so hated today? Well, stick around because by the end of the video, you'll understand how Paul George's reputation was destroyed, and why his career might be over entirely. Let's start with his first tenure, the Indiana Pacers, one that lasted from 2010 to 2017. PG went from beloved in Indy to one of the franchise's biggest villains in just a few years. The moment in which Paul George truly arrived as a franchise player came in the 2013 playoffs, where he famously battled against LeBron James in the Eastern Conference Finals. In this series, George had several iconic moments, including his game-tying 3 in Game 1 and his dunk on Birdman in Game 2. He genuinely went toe-to-toe with prime LeBron James, forcing the eventual champion Heat to a Game 7, which they ultimately lost. PG's 2013 postseason showing will always be remembered by fans as legendary, and does a lot of heavy lifting for the positive side of his public image today.
What kind of brought you to become a fan of Pete?
Indiana Pacers Paul George was definitely a great year, especially dunking on Birdman. I think that's favorite highlight of yours, for sure.
The 2014 playoffs saw the Pacers get presented with yet another opportunity at beating the Heat, but they failed again, losing this time in 6. In what would end up being a consistent theme throughout his career, PG was inconsistent in this series. He failed to show up in Games 2 and 3 when his team needed him, but exploded in Game 5 for 37 to keep their season alive. Regardless of a few poor performances sprinkled here and there, both the 2013 and 2014 playoffs were a success for Paul George. He and the Pacers had proven to be one of the biggest thorns in the side of LeBron's reign of terror in the East. PG's reputation was that of a widely respected rising star with a great postseason resume. This argument was further strengthened in the 2016 playoffs, his first postseason after the brutal Olympics leg injury. In round 1 against the Toronto Raptors, George performed incredibly, averaging 27 a game on 45, 42, 90 splits, a dominant offensive showcase. It's crazy looking back at the discourse that surrounded the series, because NBA fans from all corners were praising Paul George as a playoff savant, with people saying he would go down as the greatest Pacer ever, and saying that in the postseason, PG flipped a switch. Such comments being made nowadays would get you ratioed on Twitter, but back in 2016, it was the common belief amongst fans. Since then though, his reputation has done a complete 180. So what happened? The first wave of criticism directed at Paul George began to mount in the 2017 playoffs, thanks to a series of events that made him look like a terrible teammate and leader. In round 1, Indy faced the Cavs, in a series that many felt they could win if they locked in and kept their mistakes to a minimum. In Game 1, they had a real chance at stealing the dub. PG hit a series of crunch time buckets that pulled the Pacers back into the game. But on the final possession of the game with the Pacers down by 1, the Cavs sent a double to George, who passed it up to his sharpshooting teammate CJ Miles. George immediately called for the ball back, but with the clock winding down and PG being in a difficult position, CJ opted to take the final shot, getting off a relatively clean look that didn't fall. PG was enraged. He wanted the last shot and didn't get it. He was visibly frustrated on the court after the miss, and was even more upset in the post-game interview, where he called out his teammate Miles in front of the world.
I talked to CJ about it. Situations like that, I got to get the last shot.
It was a horrible quote, and many perceive this as PG throwing his teammate under the bus. As you'll soon learn throughout the video, this guy just doesn't know how to keep his mouth shut. This comment put a magnifying glass on PG's own clutch stats as well. Is he clutch? Well, in a 2017 article that analyzed all of his potential go-ahead or game-tying shots with under 30 seconds, it was revealed that PG had shot just 4 of 30, or 13.3% from the field. He was incredibly unclutch, yet still felt the need to call out his teammate for taking what was in the moment an open jumper. It only got worse though as the series went on. In Game 2, the Pacers lost another close one, with PG once again voicing his displeasure in the post-game interview. He said that Lance Stephenson's body language had to improve, and that Miles Turner needed to do a better job at boxing out Tristan Thompson, urging him to take his game to the next level. Offering these criticisms publicly rather than behind closed doors only split up the Pacers' locker room even more. In Game 3, the Pacers suffered one of the most agonizing losses in their franchise's history, blowing a 26-point lead in the second half to lose and go down 3-0. PG specifically was horrible in the fourth quarter, going 3 of 9 in the last 10 minutes, and missing 2 key layups and 2 threes in crunch time. Game 4 was even more horrendous. He had one of the worst playoff showings of his career, shooting just 5 of 21 from the field. Despite this, Indy was still in the game, and had the chance to save their season in the final seconds down by 3 with the ball. CJ Miles, who had of course been called out earlier in the series, fired the ball to Paul George like it was a hot potato, allowing him to take the final shot he had so desperately wanted. Now's your time to shine, PG. Show him what you got.
George for the tie! Missed everything. And that punctuates the type of afternoon it's been for Paul George, the face of this Pacers franchise, and the dismay for Larry Bird.
Indiana's season was over, with the lasting memory being PG's god-awful miss on the final shot he had made such a fuss about getting. To add insult to injury, a Gatorade commercial featuring George hitting a clutch shot as time expired had been playing on televisions all series long.
No OT tonight. Ball game.
This of course spawned thousands of memes about him, many of them editing in this final brick shot in Game 4. Yeah, PG, there was no OT tonight, because you missed the shot that would have forced it. In just one playoff series, PG's entire reputation of being an elite playoff performer had been torn down to the ground. He wasn't a leader, he wasn't a winner, and now he was headed to a different team. That's right, after this series concluded, he wanted out. The bridge had been burned in Indiana. After formally letting them know he wasn't going to sign an extension, PG was sent to the Oklahoma City Thunder in the summer of 2017, providing a great opportunity to win a championship with prime Russell Westbrook. What followed in the 2 seasons he played for them, though, was basketball hell. If the 2017 playoffs were like a rock thrown at PG's reputation, then the 2018 playoffs were a nuclear strike. Against the young and scrappy Jazz in round 1, the star-studded Thunder were favored by most to advance. What followed instead was a stunning loss for OKC, driven in large part due to the horrific play of Paul George. First, let's set the stage for this series. One day before it kicked off, Paul George told Thunder reporters about playoff P.
Yeah, I ain't met playoff P yet. I'm used to these matchups. I'm used to playing against the best offensive guy.
Okay, so that was my next question. They say big time players like big time moments. What is playoff PG like?
Man, it's a fun guy to watch. You know?
It was the first time he had used this now infamous nickname. The man had self-proclaimed himself as a playoff beast. In Game 1, he backed this talk up, scoring 36, shooting 8 of 11 from deep. A great start. Maybe he was playoff P after all, said many unknowing spectators at the time.
Wrong.
Well, this was his only good game in the series. He shot just 36% from the field and 26% from 3 the rest of the way. In a close Game 2L, he shot 6 of 21, including an 0 of 6 showing in the fourth quarter that the Jazz took advantage of to steal the win. In Games 3 and 4, he scored 23 and 32, but it came on inefficient shooting and ended in 2 blowout losses. He wasn't impacting the game like fans had hoped, and was getting into real beef with opposing Jazz guard, math teacher turned NBA player Joe Ingles. Ingles was a role player, yet in Games 3 and 4, he scored 21 and 20, outplaying PG and flustering him on the court. PG looked less like a franchise star and more like a mental midget. If you think any of this is bad though, you haven't seen the elimination game 6, in which he scored 5 points. Yes, cinco, shooting 2 of 16 from the field and 0 of 6 from 3. The worst shooting performance in his career. PG-13? More like PG-13% from the field. Playoff P? More like playoff PEE. P. Utah's physicality completely disrupted George's slow and nonchalant style of offense. As a result, yet another poor playoff series had been added to PG's resume. Many believe that after this god-awful performance, George would take his talents to the LA Lakers. After all, it only made sense because it looked like he had given up on his team out there. But nope, he stayed, signing a 4-year max deal in the summer of 18. What followed was the best season of his career.
When you look at what Paul George is doing, averaging 28 and 8. It's Paul George that's been putting on a show. It's Paul George that spent the month of January averaging nearly 40.
Paul George is in the building, folks.
He was on a mission in the 2018-19 season, scoring a career-high 28 points per game, which ranked second in the league. He also earned first-team All-NBA and first-team All-Defense, and finished top 3 in the MVP and DPOY race. This was better than any year he had with Indy hands down. He was a top 10 player and one of the most feared in the league. He could lock you up on one end and dunk on you on the other. So how is it that PG's best year as a pro has one of his most forgettable playoff runs? In the 2019 postseason, he only had one amazing game, that being Game 5 where he scored 36 on 14 of 20 shooting. This was the same game that ended in the Dame shot, so yeah, quite forgettable. For the rest of the series, he shot 36% from the field and 30% from 3, including an 8 of 24 performance in Game 1, and a 3 of 16 stinker in Game 3. Why was he so ineffective? The answer lies in his health. Around late February 2019, PG began missing games due to shoulder soreness, an injury that would never go away and plague him for the rest of the season. There's a clear difference in his stats before and after these problems started to emerge. His field goal percentage dipped by 5 percentage points, and his 3-point percentage went down 7%. This of course affected him in the postseason, and explains why he was so inefficient. 2019 marked Paul George's 4th first-round exit in a row. Most put the blame on Russ though, not PG. Until he opened his mouth and spewed some nonsense yet again. Paul George's words are his own biggest enemy. After the Dame shot in Game 5 to end their season, PG remarked to reporters multiple times how,
I mean, that's a bad shot. I don't care what anybody says, that's a bad shot.
Maybe he's right, maybe he's wrong. Never mind the fact that Dame had been drilling shots like that all series long. Bars. This came off as pure saltiness though, and deflection to mask what was yet another postseason failure for PG-13. Now before we find out where Paul George's career goes from here, I need to give a quick shout out to the sponsor of today's video, Delete Me. Did you know that when you sign up for a website, data brokers make boatloads of money selling your private info to other organizations? This puts you at an increased risk of identity theft, lost job or relationship opportunities, and unwanted marketing or spam. Ever wonder why you get so many scam emails from people telling you LeBron James wants to give you $1 billion? It's because your info was stolen and given to the wrong people who exploited it. There's a solution though, and I personally recommend Delete Me, a site that removes all of your unwanted public information from search engines and data broker sites, protecting your privacy and keeping you away from scams. After putting in my info, they help me with things like keeping my email private, removing my personal unwanted info from the web, and kept my phone number private from scam calls. They can do the same for you too. You'll get 20% off Delete Me consumer plans when you go to joindeleteme.com/DylanHoops and use promo code DylanHoops at checkout. That's joindeleteme.com/DylanHoops. Now where were we? After this disastrous Blazers series, the PG Russ era ended in shocking fashion, because our boy wanted to go to his home state, California, and join forces with Kawhi Leonard in LA. Fun fact, Paul George is directly responsible for helping rebuild both the Indiana Pacers and Oklahoma City Thunder, the two teams you just saw competing in the 2025 NBA Finals. How? Well, for the Pacers, they got Tyrese Halliburton in exchange for Domantas Sabonis, who they received in the original Paul George trade. For OKC, they got Shea, Jalen Williams, and a boatload of picks from this here Paul George trade in 2019. So if you want to build a championship team, all you gotta do is trade Paul George. Take note, Sixers. Anyway, for the first time since 2014, Paul George was on a true contender. The Clippers were favored to win the championship. This was the perfect opportunity to dispel all the negativity surrounding his name. To open up the 2019-20 season, PG missed the first 12 games of the year due to recovery from his 2 shoulder surgeries in the summer. It's worth noting that up until this point in his career, PG wasn't debilitated by injuries constantly like we know him today. He had played over 70 games in 4 straight seasons, dating back to his Team USA injury. It's almost like when he arrived in LA, he took a pill that turned him into a geriatric patient, because after, he only played 70 games 1 time in the next 6 seasons. Which season did he play over 70 in? Conveniently, his contract year. How lucky. In this first year with the Clippers, he played just 48 games. Once the 2020 playoffs arrived in the bubble, the expectation was that the stacked second-seeded Clips would bulldoze their way into a meeting with the Lakers, in an evenly matched battle that would decide who gets the NBA crown. PG was right where he wanted to be, competing for a championship for his home state, playing alongside one of the best players in the world. Rather than showing up though, Paul George would enter the most unholy stretch of basketball in his career. It all started in round 1, where PG was so underwhelming that it almost single-handedly led to an upset at the hands of the 7-seeded Dallas Mavericks. In games 2 through 4, he shot an unfathomable 10 of 47 from the field, on 4 of 25 shooting from downtown. Among modern-era stars, it's one of the lowest efficiency 3-game playoff stretches ever. It got so horrible that many LA Clippers fans began turning on him, calling him out for ravaging the team with his play and demanding that he get traded. An inconceivable level of criticism that PG had never before received in his career. He was always praised as the franchise face at every other destination. In post-game interviews, George started showing up with wrapping around his shoulder, and mentioned how the bubble environment was getting to him. These were just perceived as excuses though, no one believed him. In Game 6 of this series, he scored 15 on 6 of 19 shooting, though his team was able to get the dub and advance because Kawhi scored 33. PG had survived despite having the worst series of his career. In round 2, when the Clippers needed him to step up against an improved opponent in the Denver Nuggets, PG shrank once again, as did Kawhi. Not only did the Clippers get eliminated by Denver, the team they were heavily favored to knock off, but they blew a 3-1 lead on top of it, a moment that will forever be immortalized in NBA infamy.
Oh my goodness.
Just an absolute positive choke job, period. Oh, it's just that simple. Paul George doesn't get taken off the hook either. I mean, his performance was abysmal.
PG failed to save his team while the ship was sinking, instead blurting out ridiculous quotes that made him appear arrogant and out of touch. After blowing a 17-point lead and losing in Game 5, PG said in his post-game interview that we're still in the driver's seat. Then in Game 6, Denver beat LA handily. After, PG said again in the post-game interview that we're still in the driver's seat, enraging fans that had grown to despise his cockiness. Where was the urgency? Where was the respect for your opponent?
Just stunning. Absolutely stunning. For the Clippers, this is a collapse they'll think about all summer.
Game 7 marked perhaps the lowest point in PG's career. The Nuggets destroyed the Clippers to advance to the conference finals, with George scoring just 10 points on 4 of 16 shooting. The highlight from the game, PG clanking a jumper off the side of the backboard.
When you're in a corner, wide open behind the three-point line, and you hit the side of the backboard, I can't let him off the hook.
After this embarrassing elimination, in the locker room, he reportedly tried to rally the team together, but such cries were met with eye-rolling and bewilderment by his Clippers teammates. He had lost the respect of his locker room. In the post-game interview, PG explained how the Clippers never felt like 2020 was a championship or bust year.
I think internally, we've always felt this is not a championship or bust year for us. The more chemistry for this group, the better. I think that's really the tell of the tape of this season. We just didn't have enough time together.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
This was an attempt at fanning the flames of criticism, but all it did was throw gasoline onto the fire. Then a few months later, in December 2020, he tried to toss some of that blame onto then-fired coach Doc Rivers, saying how he tried to use him like he was Ray Allen or JJ Redick, a spot-up shooter, when that wasn't what his game was. Few bought these excuses. Thanks to multiple failed postseason runs, all of Paul George's credibility as a superstar had been demolished. In the eyes of most viewers, PG's legacy was set in stone as a fraud who always shriveled up on the biggest stage, or in other words, as Pandemic P. PG used this failure as motivation for what would go down as a bounce-back year of epic proportions. What made the 2020-21 season incredibly special for Paul George was his performance in the playoffs, in a run that would go down as the greatest postseason of his career. Not only did PG put up the numbers, not only did he get wins, but it all came off the back of him carrying the Clips without Kawhi Leonard. In Game 4 of the Western Conference Semis, Leonard tore his ACL in an injury that left the entire Clippers franchise demoralized. LA had a real chance at making their first conference finals ever, and this injury seemed like the nail in the coffin to those wishes. PG, who had lost the trust of everyone over the years with his countless postseason failures, finally stepped up. Against the number 1 seeded Jazz in Game 5, he went off for 37 points, taking over the guts of the game with a series of unbelievable shots.
And he's got it! Wow.
He became the first Clippers player to ever record 35-plus points, 15-plus rebounds, and 5-plus assists in a playoff game. In Game 6, the entire team played well. LA overcame a 25-point deficit to stun the Jazz and clinch their first Western Conference Finals appearance ever. PG and the gang had done it without their number 1 star. George had shouldered the load, leading the entire league in minutes played during these playoffs. Against the Suns in the conference finals, LA was clearly outmatched, but PG's excellent play helped the Clips steal 2 wins. Specifically in Game 5, he exploded for 41, the most by any one Clippers player ever in the playoffs, carving up Phoenix's defense and making Chris Paul bow down to him. His squad may have been eliminated, but this playoff run single-handedly revived PG's reputation from the grave. He led his team to the conference finals without Kawhi, despite the incredible pressure and minutes load that was placed on him. He scored over 20 points in every single playoff game, and he showed the leadership that critics had been desiring for years. Believe it or not though, this series in 2021 was the last noteworthy moment of PG's career. In the 2021-22 season, he played just 31 games, being sidelined for most of it with a torn UCL in his right elbow. He returned right as the season was ending with the goal of guiding the Clippers through the play-in and into the playoffs. But just before the team's play-in game against New Orleans, he tested positive for COVID and was forced to sit out. LA lost to end their season. A comically unlucky ending. Pandemic P had come back one more time. The 2022-23 season saw PG step up his health a little bit, playing 56 games this time, but his season ended in late March due to a knee sprain. He missed the entire 2023 playoffs as a result. Fans had hoped that he'd build on his fantastic 2021 playoff run, but 2 straight years had gone by with literally nothing of relevance to speak of. The once championship contending Clippers had fallen into perpetual mediocrity because their 2 superstars spent more time in street clothes than playing games. Around this time as well, PG also started a podcast called Podcast P, a now infamous podcast that would ultimately seem like more of a priority for George than his on-the-court play. More on that later. For now, the incoming 2023-24 season was a big one for PG-13. Not because it was some sort of a championship or bust year, no, that wasn't a concern. What was most important was that this was a contract year. PG had just turned 33 and was approaching UNC status fast. This upcoming summer of 2024 was his last chance at getting a bag, and he wasn't about to pass that up. He had a strong 2023-24 season, earning another All-Star appearance, scoring efficiently, playing good defense, but above all else, he stayed healthy, playing 74 games this year, the most since 2019. In the postseason, the Clippers lost in 6 in round 1, with PG having one good game, Game 4. Every other one was average at best. The magic of the 2021 playoffs had worn off. He wasn't getting the blame for this L though, because Kawhi missed 3 games this series due to knee inflammation. Kawhi missing so much time every year made PG less susceptible to criticism from the wider NBA audience. How could he be expected to win? After all, Kawhi was out. You can't blame PG for that. The summer of 2024 saw intense negotiations take place between George and the Clippers. According to PG, the Clippers started with a disrespectful low-ball offer of 2 years $60 million, eventually itching up to 3 years $150 million after several months of talks. George wanted a no-trade clause to prove the Clippers' loyalty to him, but they said no, so PG looked for other offers on the table. Now, he wanted to go to Golden State. He'd stay in Cali and play with Steph Curry, a match made in heaven. But LA refused to engage in any sign-in trades, making such a move impossible. With both of his top options off the table, he decided to open a nearby trash can. And lo and behold, the Philadelphia 76ers were waiting inside, offering him everything he wanted, a 4-year max deal. Paul George may have never won in basketball, but he certainly won in life. He'll be getting paid $50 million a year till he's 38. It all came at the cost of tarnishing his legacy in LA though. He was now hated in both Indiana and Los Angeles thanks to his controversial exits. His first season with the Sixers was worse than anything PG haters could have imagined in their wildest dreams. Instead of competing for a championship like many expected, the Sixers had their worst season in a decade, in large part due to the ineffectiveness of PG. In the second game of the preseason against Atlanta, George hyperextended his knee, which caused him to miss the first 5 games of the season. Then 8 games after he returned, he re-injured the same knee again. Then once he returned from that, he was garbage, averaging just 16 a game, his lowest point total since 2012, on mediocre efficiency. He was a shell of his former self. In late February 2025, when the Sixers stood at 20-38, PG announced that he was pausing his podcast to focus on getting his body right and competing for a championship.
After today's episode with Dwight, I plan to take a break from the pod just to focus on getting my body right, getting mentally right, and, help this squad make a push towards our goal to finish the season out, give ourselves a chance to be in contentions to compete for a championship.
What a ridiculously unserious quote. Why'd you wait until the Sixers were 20-37 to say this? He couldn't even get wins after the podcast pause either. The Sixers proceeded to win just 4 out of the next 24 games, and George lasted just 2 more games after this announcement, eventually being ruled out for the remainder of the season for groin and knee issues. He uploaded more podcast clips to YouTube than made field goals. He published podcast episodes discussing the private players-only meetings the Sixers had, airing out their drama to the public. He made several ridiculous, outlandish quotes, like when he trashed the Charlotte Hornets franchise on his show, saying he'd never go there because it would mean the end of his career.
Oh, ironic.
Well, I've got news for you, PG. Your career is on the brink of being over right now. It's quite clear that he doesn't care about this, though. He got his money, and that's all he needed to ride off into the sunset satisfied. A horribly disappointing end for one of the most exciting players of our generation. Paul George's career will always be highly debated by NBA fans because of how polarizing it is. He's truly the definition of one player, 3 opinions. His playoff resume is the most discussed. We just went over each playoff appearance he had. So, is Paul George a bad playoff performer? No. He's simply inconsistent. He'll always have 1 or 2 great performances in the series, then 1 or 2 bad ones, and then a few average ones mixed in. It's a shame because his career should have been so much more than that. When you look at the MVP stretch he had during the 2018-19 season, it showed that PG had the potential to be a top 5 player. When you look at the 2013 and 2014 playoffs, it showed that PG had what it took to battle against the best of the best on the biggest stage. Yet, for a combination of many reasons, he never reached that potential consistently. Perhaps it was the string of injuries every season that did him in. Or maybe he's just not built to withstand the pressure like we thought he was early on. Look at his career over the last decade. 5 first-round exits, and 3 times he missed the playoffs entirely. He had only 1 elite playoff run that showcased why he became such a beloved player in the first place, 2021. Outside of that, nothing but injuries, slander, and regrettable quotes. To many NBA spectators, that'll be the legacy he unfortunately leaves behind. He will retire with no basketball home, no franchise that will retire his number. In every spot he played in, Paul George, the future Hall of Famer, left either as a disappointment or hated. It's a tragic career path for someone so talented, especially considering what he showed early on. Well, at least he's rich.